Hello Year 8, my name is Mrs Chiverton, I'm one of the science directors and I'm going to be taking you through some lessons in biology all about hormones and auxins, and this builds on some work that you did about hormones in Year 7. Today's lesson is all going to be about a condition called diabetes. Before we start today's lesson, can you make sure you have any announcements or alarms turned down on the device that you're watching this video on, and make sure that you have either got a pen and paper or a Google document open to record your answers and information from this lesson. So as part of your learning journey, as I've said, this is the Year 8 homeostasis and reproduction and auxins lessons. What we will look at today is the first lesson, which is all about diabetes. So in today's lesson, we should be able to name the hormones involved in blood sugar control and be able to evaluate the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So our first activity to get you thinking is a bit of a recall back to Key Stage 2. So what can you recall about a healthy balanced diet? Why do we need to eat a healthy balanced diet? I'd like you to write down as many ideas as you can on your Google document or in your book or piece of paper as to why we might need a healthy balanced diet. I'm going to give you 1 minute to get as many ideas down as you can. Okay, hopefully you managed to get some of these ideas down. So we need a healthy balanced diet to provide us with energy. We need the nutrients for growth and repair. We need to strengthen our immune system. We need to help maintain a healthy weight. We need that healthy balanced diet to make sure that we've got strong bones and teeth. And we need it to reduce the risk of some diseases and illnesses such as heart disease and the disease we're going to talk about today, which is diabetes. You can add anything into your list that you missed just before I move on to the next slide. Okay, so that was looking back at stuff that we'd done in Key Stage 2. So now we need to move forward and start looking at some new information. So we're just going to have a look at some foods, some typical foods that you may or may not like to eat. We've got Dolmio, a bolognese sauce. We've got a Mars bar, a standard size Mars bar, an apple, a banana, an Oreo cookie, just one single cookie. That's a mango, if you didn't recognise it, a Muller yogurt, Red Bull, can of Red Bull, one portion of granola cereal, and regular Coca-Cola, the original Coca-Cola. I'm going to give you a minute, and all I'm going to ask you to do is to put them in order of how much sugar they contain. So put the one that you think has the most sugar at the top down to the one that has the least sugar at the bottom. So let's see if we can rank them. And I think you might find a few surprises in here. Okay, so let's see if there are any surprises in our answers. So when we actually look at how much sugar is in there, I think a lot of you would have had a Mars bar or a Red Bull at the top of your list. But in actual fact, if we were going to eat all of those things, the thing with the most sugar is actually the mango. We have a can of regular cola very high there with 7.5 cubes. And then we have got our Mars bar with 6.5 cubes. The Dolmio sauce is quite high in sugar at 6 cubes, but that would just be one portion. So you might actually have less than that. The thing with the least amount of sugar is the biscuit, but then it's very rare that any of us can resist having more than one biscuit. So we would have to be aware that it's 1 cube per cookie. And if you think about having 4 or 5 cookies, then your sugar levels would go up quite high. So why are we bothered about the amount of sugar in food? Well, we have to take into account how much of a food we actually consume. So as I've said, with the Dolmio, if the whole jar is 6 cubes, it's unlikely that you personally would eat a whole jar. So sometimes when we look at the packaging, it gives us a different way of looking at the sugar rather than just a portion. And they often give you it in grams per millilitres, for example, if we looked at the 2 drinks. So in this situation, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of maths. All right, so you're going to work out the concentration of the sugar in grams per milliliter of the actual drink. All right, now to work this out, there is a clue in the units. All right, so to calculate grams per milliliter, what that actually means is the amount of grams divided by the amount of milliliters. In other words, grams divided by milliliters. So I'm going to give you a minute. You can use a calculator on your phone or a calculator if you have one handy to work this out. So how much how much sugar is there in grams per milliliter in the can of regular Coke and the can of Red Bull? It's not 33 and 27 because we've got different volumes of drink there. Off you go. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to work those out. So let's look at the Coke first of all. So we have 33, the amount of grams, divided by 330, which is the amount of milliliters, and it comes out as 0.10 grams per milliliter. The Red Bull, on the other hand, is 27 grams per 250, so it comes out as 0.11 grams per milliliter. There's not much difference between them, but the Red Bull is slightly higher in sugar per milliliter. So if you were to drink a lot more Red Bull, you would get a lot more sugar than drinking the regular Coke. So we're going to talk about blood sugar. Some of you might have heard of this term before, some of you might not have done. So our bodies need energy to function and to carry out all the chemical reactions that keep us alive. And that energy is released in our cells by a reaction called respiration. And one of the main reactants for respiration is glucose. So, glucose is a type of sugar that can be put into our blood from the foods that we eat. We've seen there that lots of foods do contain sugar, and when we digest those foods, that sugar goes into our bloodstream and we can use it for respiration to give us energy. But the amount of glucose that is in our blood must be kept quite steady. If it gets too high, that can cause us problems. If it gets too low, that can cause us problems. So our bodies have to have ways where we can store and release the glucose when we've had our meals and digested our food. And we have an organ in our bodies called the pancreas, and that releases some special chemicals called hormones, and there are two in particular, insulin and another one called glucagon, and these are responsible for controlling the amount of sugar that is in our blood. And any excess glucose, that's extra to what we need at the time, can be stored as a chemical called glycogen, and that's stored in our liver and in our muscles. So the insulin causes the glucose to be turned into glycogen and stored, and the glucagon causes it to go back the other way when we need more glucose in our blood for respiration. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to record that information. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to copy down this information onto your Google Documents or into your book or paper and fill in the missing words to record what we know about glucose and blood sugar levels. Off you go. If you finish quicker than the 2 minutes, you can always just forward fast through the video to the next section. But I am going to put up the answers in a moment for you to self-assess and make sure you've got the right answers in. Here's our answers. So glucose is a type of sugar that we can put in our blood from the foods that we eat. The amount of glucose in our blood must be kept steady. The pancreas helps us to do this using hormones insulin and glucagon. And excess glucose can also be stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles. Now, when you get to do GCSEs, you will do this in more detail. So this is just a matching exercise just to check that we've got those ideas. All right, so we have got all of the different things on our keywords on the left-hand side there, and we've got our descriptions that go with them on the right-hand side. And again, you've got 2 minutes just to complete that matching exercise. So you should be writing down each of the keywords and next to it say exactly what its description is. Okay, let's just check those off for you. So we should have had glycogen being stored glucose. We should have glucose as a type of sugar. We should have the liver as where the excess glucose can be stored. The pancreas controls the level of glucose in our blood. And insulin and glucagon are both hormones used to control the level of glucose. So just check those through very quickly and change anywhere if you've made any errors. But hopefully you've got all of those nailed. So that's generally all about what happens when our body is working well and controlling our glucose levels. Unfortunately, for some people, there is a situation where, for a lot of reasons, their body is no longer able to control their blood sugar levels effectively, and that's what we call diabetes. So it's where your body is no longer able to effectively control your blood sugar levels. Scientists think it could be caused by our genes, by certain viruses, and in some cases by obesity. Now, obesity means that you are severely overweight. Okay, and the genetic side of things isn't like some inherited diseases that you'll find out about later on when you're doing GCSE biology, but it sometimes does run in families. And there are two types of diabetes. There is type 1 diabetes, which tends to occur in childhood, and type 2 diabetes, which more commonly develops as we get older. Now, type 1 diabetes is not linked with obesity or a poor diet. In fact, we don't thoroughly understand what causes type 1 diabetes yet. Type 2 diabetes is much more linked with a poor diet and obesity. So, some information about type 1 diabetes. So in type 1 diabetes, as I said, this is the kind that usually happens in children. The pancreas stops producing insulin or only produces a very tiny amount of insulin. The symptoms that we get are tiredness, thirst, and frequent urination. That means going for a wee a lot. Okay, and thirsty, even when you've had a drink, still feeling thirsty afterwards and wanting to drink an awful lot. And being tired, even when you haven't been really exercising a lot. And what this means is that if your blood sugar level gets too high, it can become very, very dangerous and it can actually kill them. All right, because their blood sugar level is not being controlled at all because they have no insulin. People with type 1 diabetes will need to inject themselves with insulin several times a day and often do things like blood tests to check what their blood sugar level is after they've eaten, and then they know how much insulin to administer. And they also need to limit the amount of sugars and other carbohydrates that they eat and take regular exercise, because that helps to remove excess glucose from their blood. Now on to type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes tends to happen in older people. It's often linked with a poor diet or obesity, but not always. And younger people are starting to develop type 2 diabetes, and sometimes they it's not linked with obesity. So with type 2 diabetes, the pancreas still produces insulin, but for some reason the person's body cells don't respond to it properly. The symptoms are very similar to type 1 diabetes: unexplained tiredness, unexplained frequent thirst, and frequent urination, going to the toilet a lot. It also does mean that if their blood sugar levels get very high, it can be very dangerous and it can still result in death. And people with type 2 diabetes wouldn't actually benefit often from injecting themselves with insulin, as their body cells are not responding to it. So they tend to take other medications instead that allow their body to respond to what insulin is there. And being overweight can increase your chance of developing this diabetes. So you need to control your weight. You need to limit the amount of sugars and simple carbohydrates and take regular exercise. And it is possible to reverse the symptoms of type 2 diabetes if you are very, very careful with them and take the right medication as well. The easiest way to record the similarities and differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes is to do it as a table, but you can do it as paragraphs if you wish to. So what I'm talking about is what is the same about them and what is different between them. You've got 4 minutes to record that information. Off you go. Don't forget to include any causes, any symptoms, so how that makes your body work, any dangers of it, and any treatments from it. Okay, hopefully that was plenty of time to get that information done. If it wasn't, just pause and you can the video and you can carry on with. So what I would have expected to see in the similarities, I would have talked about the fact that it was dangerous for the person's blood glucose levels to get too high, and that they all need to limit their sugars and simple carbohydrates and take regular exercise, and that they have similar symptoms: tiredness, thirst, and frequent urination. In the differences, I would have expected you to have talked about the pancreas producing little or no insulin for type 1 diabetes, whereas in type 2, the pancreas still produces insulin, but the body's cells don't respond to it properly. With type 1, you need people need to inject themselves with insulin, but in type 2 it probably wouldn't benefit for them in most cases because their cells aren't responding to it. And being overweight is a increased chance for developing type 2, but that's not the case for type 1. Okay, so have a quick look at that and make any amendments that you need to. So diabetes is a condition that currently cannot be cured. However, as long as the correct medical advice is followed, there's no reason why anyone diagnosed with diabetes can't go on to lead a normal and successful life. And there are some examples of people that have done just that. One example of a very successful sportsman is Sir Steve Redgrave. Now, Sir Steve Redgrave, over his time, won 5 Olympic gold medals in rowing, and he has type 2 diabetes. Another very well-known character is the actor Tom Hanks, and he has both acted in and directed many Hollywood blockbusters, and he also has type 2 diabetes, and they are both successfully living with those conditions. Now, your final activity is to have a go at an exam style question. And we've got some keywords in here that I've underlined for you. Now, evaluate the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Evaluate means we're comparing them and coming up with our opinion about them. And suggest which you think is the most difficult to live with. That's your opinion, right? And there's not a right or a wrong answer. It's your opinion, but you need to explain why you think this, so that's telling us why. All right, so think about the differences between the two conditions, type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and tell me which one you think would be the most difficult to live with and why that would be the case. And I'm going to give you 3 minutes to complete that activity. Okay, so let's just make sure that you have mentioned the following. Have you talked about the difference in the treatments for the two different types of diabetes? Have you said what your opinion is, which one you think will be the most challenging to live with? And have you said why you think it will be the hardest to live with? I'll just give you another minute to read through your answer and see if there's anything you need to add to that. Now, because of the type of question this is, I'm not going to put up an answer for you to self-assess. This can be marked with your teacher at a later stage. So we're just about the end of this session. These are the key learning points that you should have got. And if you look at the notes and things that you have made, if there's anything that you have missed, please add these to your notes. So have you said about our bodies needing energy to function and carry out all of the chemical reactions that keep us alive? Energy is released from our cells via a reaction called respiration, and one of the main reactions for respiration is glucose. Diabetes is a condition that affects your ability to control your blood sugar levels. Have you got that? We think it's caused by genes, certain viruses, and obesity. We should have that there are two different types. And then some information there at the end. So diabetes cannot currently be cured, but just treated to control the symptoms. And as long as the correct medical advice is followed, there's no reason why we cannot go on to lead a perfectly normal and successful life. And they are working on conditions at the moment and treatments. Now, you may have been set a Google quiz by your teacher, and if so, now is the time to go on and complete that. Okay, I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.